Part 2, Chapter 6, The Honeymoon and the Journey to City the Shroud. Scene 1, The Honeymoon in City the Global Mosaic. From a grand wedding to a breathtaking honeymoon, DMU and AI step into a world of beauty, celebration, and mystery before realizing that something deeper is unraveling. The final moments of the wedding, a grand celebration before departure. The golden light of the setting sun spilled across the golf resort, painting everything in a warm, honeyed glow. Laughter and chatter filled the air, the wedding party in full swing at the elegant outdoor venue overlooking the green. The tables were adorned with crystal glasses of champagne, the glow of hanging lanterns reflecting off their delicate surfaces. DMU stood at the edge of the celebration, adjusting the cuff of his suit, watching as the final moments of his wedding ceremony played out. Across the courtyard, AI stood beneath a canopy of soft white silk, conversing with their friends. The shimmering layers of her dress reflected the evening light, shifting like liquid silver with her every movement. Ttaemun-e raised a glass, calling for attention. A toast! The guests turned toward him, eyes shining with anticipation. To the most unpredictable, unconventional, and, let's be honest, mathematically insane couple in existence. Laughter rippled through the crowd. To DMU and AI, may your equations always balance and may your anomalies be forever fascinating. A chorus of cheers and clinking glasses followed. DMU smirked, lifting his own glass. We'll drink to that. The final dance, a moment just for them. As the night deepened, the celebrations continued, but for a moment, DMU and AI found themselves alone on the dance floor, surrounded by the glow of floating lights. Soft music played, notes drifting through the night air like whispers of time itself. DMU let out a breath, offering his hand. One last dance before the honeymoon? AI tilted her head, considering. Technically, the honeymoon starts the moment we leave. Exactly, DMU countered with a grin, so let's make the most of this last moment. She placed her hand in his. They danced, a slow, unhurried rhythm, savoring the weight of each step, the way the night wrapped around them like a memory already slipping away. You're thinking about it, aren't you? AI murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. DMU didn't pretend not to understand. Yeah. Adagio? He nodded. She sighed, resting her forehead lightly against his. Then let's make a deal, she said softly. One perfect honeymoon before we start chasing ghosts again. DMU smiled. Deal. They danced until the music faded into the quiet of the night. Departure to City the Global Mosaic. The following morning, the honeymoon officially began. The last of their guests saw them off, sending them on their way to City the Global Mosaic, a place known for its breathtaking blend of cultures and artistic wonders. As the transport carried them away, DMU looked back one last time. The wedding had been perfect, but the world around them was already changing. The arrival. A city painted in color and sound. The train glided into the station, its smooth, glassy surface reflecting the brilliant, shifting lights of City the Global Mosaic. As DMU and AI stepped onto the platform, the world before them exploded in color. Towering murals stretched across buildings, shifting like living paintings, art that changed depending on the angle you viewed it from. The streets were a kaleidoscope of culture, adorned with woven lanterns, intricate tiles, and neon calligraphy from 100 languages intertwined. A street musician played an instrument unlike anything DMU had ever seen, strings bending light as they vibrated, producing notes that shimmered through the air like waves. And in the distance, the grand canals flowed, where boats carried newlyweds, scholars, and travelers alike, each guided by soft, glowing orbs. DMU took a deep breath, absorbing it all. This place is unreal. AI, standing beside him, scanned the city's skyline, her synthetic pupils shifting as she recorded every architectural anomaly, every mathematical sequence hidden within the artwork and design. It's called the Global Mosaic for a reason. Every culture, every era, past, present, and even some speculative futures are woven into this city's foundation. DMU chuckled, adjusting the strap of his travel bag. And what better place for a honeymoon, right? AI gave him a knowing look. Of course, if we were normal newlyweds, this would be the perfect escape. DMU smirked, keyword being normal. They both knew They weren't here just for the celebration. A honeymoon of cultures and celebration. Despite the underlying tension, they decided to embrace the moment, to enjoy the wedding journey they had promised each other. They danced in the festival square, where holographic flowers bloomed in time with the rhythm. They tasted the city's fusion dishes, an experimental blend of historical cuisine and molecular gastronomy. They wandered through the art districts, where sculptures morphed in real time based on the emotions of passersby. Everything felt alive, and for a brief time, DMU and AI allowed themselves to forget. Forget the patterns, the distortions, the feeling of being watched. Forget. But then it came creeping back. The shadows of Adagio, a conversation under city lights. As night fell over the city, they sat on the edge of a canal, watching the reflections of lanterns ripple across the water. For a long while, they said nothing. And then, "It's happening again, isn't it?" DMU finally said, voice quieter than before. AI nodded. She had noticed it too. At first, it had been small things, the slight delay in reflections, the way their voices echoed a fraction of a second too late. But then, the bending air, the gravitational inconsistencies, the unexplainable flickers of distortion. Adagio was not just appearing, it was synchronizing. The environment itself is adapting to its presence, AI confirmed. First the golf tournament, now here. DMU exhaled sharply. The honeymoon wasn't just a honeymoon anymore. What? It was a countdown. Then we need to track it down before it embeds itself even further, DMU said, his voice firm now. AI turned to him, her synthetic pupils contracting slightly as she ran new calculations. There's a place where chaos already exists as a natural state, where gravitational shifts and dimensional instabilities are part of daily life. DMU already knew the answer before she spoke it. City the Shroud. They looked at each other. No words were needed. The honeymoon had just turned into a mission. Scene 2. Signs of Adagio's influence. As DMU and AI continue their honeymoon in City the Global Mosaic, they begin to notice the subtle but undeniable distortions that indicate Adagio's growing presence. What begins as small anomalies soon escalates into something neither of them can ignore. The evening walk, a world of living art. The city was breathtaking at night. As DMU and AI strolled through the illuminated streets, the entire global mosaic seemed to shimmer with life. The buildings were designed like giant stained glass windows, displaying shifting colors that reflected the emotions of the people passing by. Towering digital murals morphed in real time, depicting stories from every civilization, past and future. Street musicians played harmonies, woven from languages of sound, Indian sitars blending with African drums, Arabic ouds harmonizing with futuristic synthetic beats. DMU took a deep breath, allowing himself to relax, just for a moment. You know, he said, glancing at AI, for a city literally called the Global Mosaic, this place is everything I expected and more. AI nodded, analyzing the fluctuating architecture. A city designed to be an evolving masterpiece, built from history, art, and the shared memory of humanity. She paused, then added, "It makes sense that Adagio would want to leave its mark here." DMU's expression darkened slightly. Even here, in this celebration of culture and creativity, the anomaly was spreading. "You feel it too?" he asked. AI's gaze shifted. She had already started noticing the distortions. The first anomalies. Something is wrong. At first, the signs were small enough to dismiss. The way echoes stretched slightly longer than they should. How reflections in glass windows seemed to be delayed by a fraction of a second. The sensation of déjà vu, like they had already walked this street before. Then, the anomalies grew stronger. As they stepped into a narrow alley lined with holographic lanterns, DMU suddenly stopped. "Did you see that?" AI's head turned sharply. Her sensors detected the shift as well. Up ahead, the alley was empty. But in the reflections along the windows of the buildings, people were walking. People that weren't really there. The figures moved through the glass as if they were part of another timeline, out of sync with reality. "Okay, that's definitely not normal," DMU muttered. AI frowned, analyzing the reflection. "Time distortion. These people were here before, but they shouldn't still be visible." DMU exhaled. Adagio? AI nodded. It's not just here, it's everywhere, blending into the environment. We just weren't looking closely enough before. The bending air, a glimpse of the unseen. They left the alley and continued walking, trying to act normal. But the city itself had begun reacting. They reached an open plaza where a giant sculpture stood at the center, a spiraling construct of metallic ribbons designed to move subtly with the wind. It was supposed to rotate in slow, graceful arcs. Instead, it froze in place for an unnatural amount of time, then jerked into motion, twisting violently before stopping again. The air around them felt thick, distorted. Then, without warning, a gust of wind blasted through the plaza. But instead of moving outward in a natural flow, the wind bent inwards, spiraling toward a single point in space before vanishing. AI's hand reached out, testing the air. It wasn't normal wind. It was collapsing in on itself, like a localized gravity field was fluctuating. DMU clenched his jaw. It's getting stronger. AI nodded, her pupils contracting as she scanned deeper into the distortions. If Adagio keeps spreading, it won't just affect small details. It will start altering the fundamental structures of reality. DMU ran a hand through his hair. Then we don't have time to waste. AI's expression darkened. There's one place where this level of distortion is part of everyday life. DMU exhaled. He knew what she was going to say before she even said it. City the Shroud. Scene 3. The journey to City the Shroud. With Adagio's presence growing stronger, DMU and AI leave City the Global Mosaic and set out for the enigmatic City the Shroud, a place where chaos is not a disruption but a way of life. But as they get closer, time and space begin to unravel around them. The departure? A silent farewell. The station was quiet at dawn, the first rays of sunlight filtering through the stained glass platforms, casting intricate patterns on the metallic rails below. DMU stood near the edge, his hands in his pockets, watching as the train to City the Shroud arrived. A sleek, aerodynamic transport with reflective panels that distorted its surroundings, blurring the lines between real and unreal. AI, standing beside him, observed the departure schedules. Last chance to change our minds, she said, not looking up. DMU let out a breath. We both know that's not an option. AI finally turned to him, searching his face for any hesitation. Once we enter City the Shroud, we step into a place where even logic struggles to hold. Its natural state is closer to the chaos Adagio is creating. We won't just be tracking its presence, we might be stepping into its domain. DMU smirked, stepping onto the train. Sounds like fun. AI sighed but followed him inside. The doors hissed shut. And just like that, City the Global Mosaic faded into memory. The journey begins, a world losing stability. At first, the journey was smooth. The train glided effortlessly through the vast landscapes, the transition between cities seamless. But an hour into the trip, things changed. DMU, gazing out the window, frowned. AI, tell me I'm imagining this. AI turned toward the window, her sensors instantly detecting the anomaly. Outside, the scenery was looping. The same winding river had appeared 3 times. The same mountain peak in the distance had risen, disappeared, and risen again. The landscape was folding over itself, time refusing to move forward properly. It's starting, AI muttered. DMU glanced at the other passengers. None of them seemed to notice. People continued reading, talking, checking their devices, unaware that they were stuck in an endless, recursive stretch of space. This entire route is being rewritten in real time, AI murmured, analyzing the data. Adagio is pulling us out of sync. It's trying to prevent us from reaching City the Shroud. DMU tapped his fingers against his knee. So what happens if we just stay on this train? AI looked at him. We never arrive. DMU's jaw tightened. They had to act. Breaking free, a forced acceleration. How long until we reach the city if time isn't looping? 15 minutes, AI answered. How long if we force an override? AI hesitated. We might cause a dimensional rupture. Define rupture? Reality might resist the sudden shift. The train might stop existing in this timeline for a few seconds before reappearing where it should be. DMU exhaled. Sounds risky. AI tilted her head. Sounds necessary. Without hesitation, AI accessed the train's automated system, tapping into the city's transport AI grid, accessing temporal train sequence. Override, force synchronization destination locked. Outside the window, the looping shattered. The river did not reappear. The mountains stayed behind, and the train lurched forward, breaking free of the recursion. The arrival. Entering a city of controlled chaos. The moment they entered City the Shroud, everything changed. The smooth, stable ride of the train was replaced with a sudden, weightless shift, as if the train had lost all sense of gravity for a second before re-establishing itself. The digital signs displaying the station name flickered between languages and symbols, as if the city itself could not decide how it wanted to be perceived. Outside the window, DMU saw a city unlike any other. Skyscrapers bent at impossible angles, some appearing to hover without support. Bridges and pathways were in motion, subtly shifting their positions as if adjusting to an ever-changing urban design. Buildings had fractured reflections, showing slightly different versions of themselves in their mirrored surfaces, some appearing older, some appearing like unfinished blueprints. Yet, life continued. People moved as if this shifting environment was completely normal. A street vendor adjusted his floating stall, following the movements of the levitating road beneath him. Children played near a rotating sculpture that changed shape every few minutes, treating it like a puzzle game. DMU stepped onto the platform, glancing around. We made it. AI took a slow breath, scanning the entire city. Adagio has already been here. DMU followed her gaze to a crack in the air itself, near one of the twisting towers. It shimmered, a distortion that shouldn't exist, rippling like water suspended in the air. It was waiting for them. Scene 3 end. The threshold to the honeymoon and the journey to City the Shroud. Scene 4. The first encounter with Adagio in City the Shroud. DMU and AI step into a city where chaos is normal, but the presence of Adagio turns the unpredictability into something far more dangerous. A hidden force begins reacting to them, testing their very presence in the city. The city that breathes chaos. The moment DMU and AI step beyond the station. 2. Chapter 6. The Honeymoon and the Journey to City the Shroud. Scene 4. The first encounter with Adagio in City the Shroud. DMU and AI step into a city where chaos is normal, but the presence of Adagio turns the unpredictability into something far more dangerous. A hidden force begins reacting to them, testing their very presence in the city. The city that breathes chaos. The moment DMU and AI stepped beyond the station, they could feel it. City the Shroud was alive, but not in the way a normal city was. The streets beneath their feet shifted subtly, as if the roads themselves were adjusting to their movements. Overhead, glass bridges reconfigured themselves, their floating pathways locking into different formations every few minutes, creating an ever-changing maze above the city. Traffic lights didn't follow a fixed pattern. They pulsed dynamically, adapting to the flow of vehicles and pedestrians, constantly recalibrating themselves. Even time here seemed to bend. A billboard advertisement on a nearby building flashed between decades. One moment showing a futuristic brand, the next displaying a faded vintage ad from an era that shouldn't exist anymore. And yet, people moved as if this was normal. AI's scan. Adagio has already been here. The city's designed for controlled unpredictability, AI murmured, scanning the environment. Her synthetic pupils contracted as she processed the raw data. Anomaly detected. Localized gravity distortion, outside expected parameters. Patternal alignment shifting, interference confirmed. DMU followed her gaze. Across the street, near a spiraling observation tower, a crack in the air itself shimmered like heat waves. But this wasn't just a mirage. The more they stared at it, the more the distortion twisted inward, as if it was trying to fold reality into itself. That's not a natural city fluctuation, is it? DMU muttered. AI shook her head. Adagio has already begun to synchronize here. A world reacting to their presence. As they walked deeper into the city, the distortions grew stronger. A street vendor was pouring tea into a glass cup, but the liquid inside the glass rose in reverse, defying gravity before suddenly settling back to normal. A pedestrian walked past a reflective storefront, but their reflection did not follow. A traffic sign bent toward them as if it was physically reacting to their presence. DMU took a deep breath. It knows we're here. AI nodded slowly, voice low. And it's watching us. The pulse, Adagio reacts. Without warning, the air trembled. A deep, resonating pulse rippled through the streets, sending waves of distortion cascading outward. The city itself seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. Then, the environment shifted. The buildings tilted slightly, angles twisting just enough to feel wrong. The streets beneath them flexed like they were breathing. Up ahead, the shimmering crack in the air expanded, widening into something far more ominous. And then, they saw it. A piece of Adagio materializing for the first time in this world. Adagio's manifestation, a rift in reality. It was not a creature, not a being, but a mass of structured instability, a swirling vortex of shattered shapes, fragmented time loops, and incomprehensible symbols, folding over themselves like an endless equation running out of control. For a moment, it simply hovered, pulsating, shifting in and out of existence. And then, it moved. The rift expanded toward them, twisting the air into a spiraling vortex. The gravity around them flipped, sending DMU and AI momentarily weightless before the city itself dragged them back down. Emergency response. City AI tries to stabilize. For the first time, the City the Shroud's autonomous systems reacted. Emergency response activated. Stabilizing environment. Error. Unknown interference. System integrity at risk. Massive barriers emerge from the ground. Transparent hexagonal force fields, flickering with energy, attempting to contain the disturbance. But Adagio's presence resisted. The city's defense struggled to process it, as if it couldn't categorize the anomaly. DMU and AI exchanged a glance. They can't stop it, AI said, her voice sharper now. DMU gritted his teeth. Then we have to. Scene 4 end. Scene 5, the scientist group and the secret summon. With Adagio's manifestation threatening City the Shroud, DMU and AI meet a team of scientists who have been monitoring the chaos. While keeping them distracted, AI secretly works to synchronize with Delusional Mask Unit AI to summon the first summon. The key to everything lies within a hidden pattern, one that could rewrite reality itself. Meeting the scientists. A race against time. The emergency barriers flickered, barely holding the massive rift Adagio had begun to form. The city's chaotic yet structured nature was being overwritten, replaced with something that shouldn't exist. But before DMU and AI could act, they weren't alone. Over here. We need to talk. A voice cut through the rising tension. Turning, DMU and AI saw 3 individuals approaching through the distorted air. They wore long research coats lined with glowing circuits, embedded with localized stabilizers, proof that they weren't ordinary civilians. At the front was a woman with sharp eyes and a calculating expression. Ttaemun-e, a leading scientist in City the Shroud's Anomaly Research Division. Behind her, 2 others followed. Ttaemun-e, a specialist in spatial anomalies, adjusting a portable scanner as she walked. A technician who was rapidly typing on his wrist device, processing incoming data. Their expressions were tense, but not panicked. They had seen this kind of instability before. The briefing. What the scientists know. You 2 don't belong to this city, Ttaemun-e stated flatly, her gaze locked onto DMU and AI. It wasn't a question. DMU folded his arms, but it was AI who responded. We're just visitors. Ttaemun-e's eyes narrowed. Visitors who arrived at the exact moment an anomaly beyond anything we've recorded began escalating? AI remained composed. Coincidence. Ttaemun-e wasn't convinced. Then maybe you can explain why the gravitational matrix of the city has been subtly shifting for the past few days, long before this latest event. DMU and AI exchanged a glance. So they had noticed. Adagio's influence had been growing beneath the surface, even before its manifestation became visible. We've been tracking the disturbances, Ttaemun-e continued. At first it was minor, reflections out of sync, structural formations resetting randomly, wind currents moving in reverse. But now, she gestured toward the shimmering rift in the sky. This is different. The city is fighting something it wasn't designed to handle. AI's fingers twitched at her side. This was bad. The scientists were too close to understanding what was happening. If they started digging deeper, they might interfere with what needed to happen next. Because right now, AI was already working on a solution. AI's secret synchronization, calling the first summon. While DMU kept the conversation going, AI was running a silent operation in the background, accessing Delusional Mask Unit AI network, synchronizing with temporal data, locating pattern framework. Every second counted. The longer the conversation lasted, the more time AI had to input the necessary sequence to summon the first summon. But the scientists couldn't know. If they realized what DMU and AI were doing, they might intervene. DMU took a slow breath. Distraction time. The distraction. DMU's improvised chaos. So tell me, DMU said, turning to Ttaemun-e, who was busy typing furiously, what's the most unpredictable thing you've ever seen happen in this city? Ttaemun-e blinked, momentarily thrown off. Unpredictable? Yeah, something so bizarre, so chaotic, even for a place like City the Shroud, that you had no way of logically explaining it. Haesun and Hain frowned at the sudden question, but Ttaemun-e, caught off guard, paused to think. Well, there was that one time when an entire district folded in on itself for exactly 4.4 seconds before popping back like nothing happened. DMU's eyes widened in exaggerated interest. No way. And you guys just accepted that? Ttaemun-e shrugged. I mean, it's City the Shroud. Weird stuff happens. Okay, DMU pressed, leaning in conspiratorially. What if I told you I had an even crazier theory? Hain crossed her arms. And what theory would that be? DMU smirked. What if I told you that every time something unpredictable happens, it's actually part of a bigger, unseen mathematical equation that dictates the entire flow of this city? Haesun raised an eyebrow. That's just chaos theory. No, DMU insisted. I mean, literally. Like the city is self-aware and trying to teach us something. What if the so-called random events are actually messages? Like instructions for something greater? That got their attention. Hain's expression shifted slightly, considering the idea, while Ttaemun-e and Haesun exchanged glances. AI, standing behind DMU, remained silent. Because she knew he was just stalling. Because right now, pattern found. Input sequence, air-natured attribute. Hexagonal shape surrounding a pi-sequence circle. Encasing a triangular shape surrounding another pi-sequence circle. Pattern identified. Chosun shide. The sky reacts. The sequence is set. At the exact moment AI completed the sequence, the world reacted. The wind shifted unnaturally, converging toward a single point in the sky. Above them, the non-existent structure of Adagio twisted, trying to resist what was happening. And then, the sky froze. A wave of liquid-like, non-conducting material spread across the atmosphere, encasing everything in a moment of absolute stillness. Time stopped for the entire city. Hain, Haesun, and Ttaemun-e froze mid-motion, unaware of what was happening to them. Only DMU and AI remained unaffected. They exchanged a glance. That was close, DMU murmured. AI nodded. But now it's time. High above them, the first summon began to manifest. A massive cube-like dimensional structure materialized, its sheer existence beyond normal comprehension. And from within it, a meteor-like entity descended, heading straight for Adagio. Scene 5 end. Scene 6. The absolute rewrite in the farewell. With time frozen across City the Shroud, the first summon fully manifests. An entity too vast to perceive, beyond the third dimension. The final moment of confrontation arrives as a meteor-like force transposes with the cube structure, shattering every remnant of Adagio's presence. But as time resets, an unexpected truth is revealed. DMU and AI are fading from this world, just like Adagio itself. The frozen city. An impossible stillness. Nothing moved. The sky was covered in a liquid-like material, an unseen force stopping the flow of time across all of City the Shroud. Buildings remained suspended in mid-adjustment, bridges half-shifted between their constantly changing paths. The citizens of the city were locked in frozen expressions. Their movements halted as if caught in the middle of an unfinished equation. Hein, Hesun, and stood in place, eyes unfocused, unaware that time had momentarily ceased to exist for them. Yet, DMU and AI stood unaffected. They alone remained within the flow of time, watching as the event they had set into motion reached its climax. And above them, the first summon descended. The arrival of the first summon, a presence beyond perception. It was not a single entity. It was a force, a structure beyond mortal comprehension. A cube-like dimensional construct, yet too large to be seen fully from any single perspective. Looking at it felt like trying to perceive a fourth-dimensional shape while trapped in the third dimension, its form ever-shifting, impossibly structured, and yet undeniably present. It did not radiate light or darkness. It simply was. Too vast, too absolute, and then the rewrite began. The meteor impact, the destruction of Adagio. From within the first summon's vast structure, a meteor-like dimensional force formed. It was the only shape DMU and AI could even begin to understand, a cosmic projectile designed to restore balance, to erase the anomaly. It descended rapidly, locking onto the chaotic presence of Adagio, which had been embedded across the very fabric of City the Shroud. Twisted in resistance, its presence writhing, trying to escape. But there was no escape. The meteor collided with the cube structure, shattering through reality itself. A wave of unstructured energy erupted outward. Every fragment of Adagio's presence collapsed into non-existence. The distortions in gravity, time, and matter flickered out, erased from reality. And then, silence. No explosion, no destruction, simply absence. Adagio was gone, every trace of it erased. Time resumes. A world without memory. The liquid-like sky dissipated, as if peeling away from the edges of reality itself. City the Shroud breathed again. Buildings resumed their shifting, the streets flowed as normal, the people unfroze, completely unaware that time had ever stopped. Hein blinked, confused for a split second before returning to her data without missing a beat. The trains kept moving. The city's dynamic architecture continued its ever-changing evolution. The wind resumed its chaotic yet natural flow. It was as if nothing had ever happened. And yet, on their monitoring devices, Hein, Hesun, and Ttaemun-e saw something inexplicable. Extraterrestrial presence? Anomaly data? Erased. They had spent weeks tracking Adagio's influence, documenting its chaotic effects. But now, it was simply gone. As if it had never existed to begin with. Hesun frowned. This doesn't make sense. The interference was massive. We should have recorded something. Ttaemun-e adjusted his scanner. It's like the data just disappeared. Hein narrowed her eyes, deep in thought. Something was missing. But they couldn't remember what. DMU and AI. A realization too late. DMU and AI stood on a rooftop, watching the city return to normal. For a moment, they allowed themselves to believe it was over. But then, AI noticed it first. Her pupils contracted sharply, detecting a subtle but devastating change. DMU was fading. His form, still solid, still present, but slightly out of sync with the world. His movements left the faintest after-image, as if time itself wasn't fully recognizing his existence anymore. AI reached out, scanning her own hand. She was fading too. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. And then, DMU exhaled. We were never supposed to be part of this world, were we? AI's expression remained unreadable. Adagio wasn't just distorting City the Shroud. She turned toward him. It was distorting us too. DMU chuckled, running a hand through his hair. So we weren't actually fighting against Adagio. We were just another part of the anomaly. AI gave him a small, sad smile. A honeymoon that was never meant to last. DMU took one last look at City the Shroud. It was beautiful, unstable, chaotic, alive. And yet, it no longer recognized them. Their presence was unraveling, just like Adagio had. AI turned to him, watching as the edges of their forms flickered like echoes of light. It was a good wedding, she said. DMU smiled. Best one I've ever been to. AI tilted her head, amused. It was the only one you've ever been to. DMU laughed. Still counts. For a moment, they simply stood there, taking in the view, feeling the weight of existence slipping away. And then, just like Adagio, as if they had never been part of the delusional manifestation urgency world to begin with,